my brother right here from day one. We used to wake up and, damn, pause, but like, check this out.
You already made everybody think I'm crazy. You already took my family away. You already separated all my friends. I don't got no celebrity friends.
When Cassie Ventura took the stand, the courtroom became a pressure cooker of anticipation. This wasn't just another celebrity trial. This was an unraveling, a moment where the carefully curated facade of one of music's most influential figures began to crumble. Cassie didn't just tell her story, she ripped open the veil that had hidden years of torment, humiliation, and manipulation. The image of Diddy Combs as a charismatic mogul, a cultural icon, and a self-proclaimed genius was replaced by the portrait of a man who thrived on control, whose empire wasn't just built on music and business acumen, but on fear, silence, and coercion.
There were two women who said that they had been abused, saying it happened decades ago, and they thought that they could look at the evidence in this case, which is about assault, and view it fair and unbiased based on what comes into the courtroom. And one woman who is proceeding said she was arrested when she was 16 for shoplifting at Harry Potter's World at Universal Studios. The judge asked her what she stole. She said it was a wand.
Her testimony began with the glittering surface of their relationship. Cassie had been young, ambitious, and starstruck when she entered Diddy's orbit. He was magnetic, a man who could make you feel like the world revolved around you. From the outside, it looked like a dream, a rising R&B star swept into the arms of a music mogul. But that dream, as she revealed, was a meticulously staged performance. Beneath the red carpet appearances and private jet trips was a reality steeped in control. Every decision she made, from her career to her social life, had to pass through him. He positioned himself as her protector, her mentor, her everything, but that protection came with a price. It wasn't love, it was ownership.
Well, first of all, I can only imagine how sloppy Sean Combs was with evidence when he got busted with those 2 machine guns or 3 machine guns with the altered serial numbers. So I really don't trust Sean Combs or the people around him's ability to properly cover up anything. So I envision that you're going to see a trial, payments from his Amex for flights for people, straight payments directly from his company to people.
Cassie's first chilling revelation was how the isolation began. She described how Diddy cut her off from friends and family, slowly but surely dismantling her support system. It wasn't immediate, it was calculated. Invitations from friends were intercepted, opportunities to reconnect with family were sabotaged, and soon she found herself dependent on him for everything emotionally, financially, and professionally. But it wasn't just isolation. Cassie painted a picture of surveillance, of a life where her moves were monitored and her autonomy was systematically stripped away. She described how he controlled her finances, her communication, even her wardrobe, ensuring that every aspect of her existence served his needs.
Absolutely not surprising, because they want to get to a fair and impartial jury, and someone who has already formed an opinion, for example, is not going to be someone that the defense is going to want to move forward with, because you are supposed to listen to what the judge says in the 4 corners of the room.
More disturbing, though, were the moments of escalation. Cassie recounted specific incidents where Diddy's jealousy and paranoia turned into explosive outbursts. There was the infamous 2016 hotel incident, now infamous thanks to security footage that has since gone viral. The video, which shows him chasing her down a hallway, grabbing her by the neck, and dragging her while hotel staff hesitated to intervene, was only the tip of the iceberg. She explained how this wasn't an isolated moment of rage, but part of a pattern. Every time she attempted to assert her independence, whether it was performing at events without his approval, speaking to other men, or even appearing too confident, it triggered episodes where his temper turned physical. These weren't private arguments, they were public spectacles, leaving witnesses stunned but silent.
Right? I ain't never been back to the hospital since 2015, but every time they say I'm crazy, it's just when I'm saying the truth.
One of the most shocking details came when Cassie revealed how Diddy allegedly used his influence and connections to intimidate those around her. She described how even high-profile celebrities and industry insiders turned a blind eye, fearing the repercussions of crossing him. Cassie spoke of illicit parties where whispers of his behavior circulated but were quickly dismissed. He had a way of cloaking his actions in charisma, of making his victims seem like willing participants in their own suffering. His charm wasn't just a tool for seduction, it was a weapon, a shield that kept people from questioning his darker side.
Let's talk about the filth that's starting to come out in the early days of the Diddy trial. This, of course, is P. Diddy. Surprise, surprise, he's a creep. Surprise, surprise, he's done horrible things.
But the courtroom truly shifted when Cassie pulled back the curtain on what she called Diddy's empire of silence. She alleged that his entire operation, from his record label to his personal staff, was designed to keep his secrets hidden. Assistants were tasked with running interference, security guards were instructed to look the other way, and even his closest friends were complicit in maintaining his image. Cassie described how he leveraged NDAs and financial settlements to ensure that his victims couldn't speak out. These weren't just rumors, there were receipts, evidence of payments made to individuals who had been silenced after witnessing or experiencing his wrath.
The time frame is important because this happened in hotels, in places that have surveillance, that there's records that could be consistent with his testimony about when he alleges that these parties took place. He probably has his own information about who attended the events. When you're somebody like Sean Combs and you're such a celebrity and you're engaged in this type of behavior, people around you are memorializing it's.
The most harrowing part of her testimony wasn't just about what Diddy had done to her, it was about the lengths he allegedly went to in order to control the people around her. Cassie revealed that Diddy didn't just target her, he targeted anyone who got too close. She described an incident involving Kid Cudi, who she had briefly dated during a rough patch in her relationship with Diddy. According to Cassie, Diddy's jealousy boiled over when he found out about their relationship. She alleged he made a chilling threat, stating he would destroy Cudi. Months later, Cudi's car mysteriously went up in flames in his driveway. At the time, it was written off as an unfortunate accident, but Cassie's testimony cast it in a far more sinister light.
Unfortunately, we're all going to take a disgusting trip to his seedy, awful world. You know, the man has no class. He has no kindness in his dark, dark heart. And he's depraved. That's my opinion. This is a depraved, disgusting individual about whom I wish to hear nothing after this trial is done.
And Kid Cudi wasn't the only name to surface. Cassie's testimony painted a picture of a man who used his connections to manipulate not just her life, but the lives of those who entered his orbit. She claimed that his jealousy extended to other celebrities, citing an incident where she had been invited to perform at Prince's legendary estate. It was a career-defining moment, a chance to step out of Diddy's shadow. But when he found out, he allegedly followed her to the event, confronting her afterward in a fit of rage. The fallout wasn't just emotional, it was physical. Cassie described how he berated and humiliated her, ensuring that what should have been a triumphant moment was overshadowed by his need to dominate her.
They can't control me. You get what I'm saying? They can control Shaq. They can control Charles Barkley. They can control LeBron James.
The trial wasn't just about Cassie's experiences, though. Her testimony opened the door to a larger conversation about the culture of silence that allowed Diddy's alleged behavior to go unchecked for so long. She spoke about the enabler's friends, employees, and even other celebrities who kept his secrets. The courtroom buzzed as names like Ye, Britney Spears, and Michael B. Jordan were mentioned, not as direct participants, but as individuals who had been in his orbit, attending his infamous parties or witnessing his erratic behavior. These weren't accusations, they were glimpses into a world where power and fame created a shield of untouchability.
The question is he a criminal? You know, is he basically akin to a mob boss running several criminal enterprises? And while it's very clear to me he is a depraved, disgusting person, we have to prove that he violated the law.
Cassie's revelations also hinted at an even darker undercurrent, the role of Diddy's inner circle in maintaining his control. She described how assistants would deliver messages on his behalf, how security teams would intercept her if she tried to leave, and how even his sons, Christian and Justin, were drawn into his web of influence. The courtroom gasped when it was revealed that Christian Combs had been accused of misconduct during one of his father's lavish yacht parties, raising questions about whether this culture of control and entitlement had trickled down to the next generation.
They can control Jay-Z and Beyonce,
But not you, man.
but they can't control me. You
Not
see, it
you.
ain't no name I won't name.
Exactly.
It's up.
But perhaps the most damning part of Cassie's testimony was the way she framed Diddy's behavior as not just personal, but systemic. She described how his empire wasn't just a business, it was a fortress, designed to protect him at all costs. From the tunnels beneath his mansion to the surveillance systems that monitored every corner of his properties, Diddy had created an environment where he was untouchable. Cassie's words left the courtroom with a chilling realization. This wasn't just about one man's actions, it was about an entire system that enabled him, a culture that prioritized power and silence over accountability. And as she stepped down from the stand, it was clear that the story was far from over.
And what's really going to be interesting is the parade of celebrities who we expect to be mentioned and or called into that courtroom. You know, people who we hadn't heard about prior, like Mike Myers, you know, Austin Powers, Mike Myers. Why is he getting called? Why is he on the witness list? That'll be fascinating. And then, of course, there are the no-name, quote unquote, women who are going to have to find every ounce of courage they have.
But the cracks in Diddy's fortress didn't stop with Cassie's account. As the trial moved forward, whispers from others who had been caught in his orbit began to ripple through the courtroom like shockwaves. The prosecution wasn't just interested in painting a picture of one man's abusive behavior, they were building a case that exposed an entire culture of excess, intimidation, and unchecked power. And it wasn't just Cassie. It wasn't just one person's word against a music mogul. The floodgates were opening, and what poured out threatened to drown not just Diddy, but an entire ecosystem of enablers, collaborators, and complicit bystanders.
This is somebody that actually thought that he was above the law. So I can only, think that, he was sloppy in the way that he did these crimes, that there's probably a trail of evidence, not only involving him, but everybody in his circle that he would, delegate these responsibilities to.
The next revelation centered on Diddy's infamous white parties, those ultra-exclusive gatherings that became the stuff of legend in Hollywood lore. For years, they were branded as glamorous spectacles. An invitation to one of these events was a golden ticket to the upper echelon of fame and fortune. But behind the curated Instagram moments and designer attire was a different reality, one that former attendees were now describing as anything but elegant. Witnesses began to recount what they had seen behind closed doors, and the stories were as dark as they were damning. These weren't just parties, they were power plays. Attendees spoke of a hierarchy, with Diddy at the top, orchestrating the room like a conductor with a baton. He controlled the guest list, the tone, the access, and most disturbingly, the people. Former staffers began to testify under subpoena, describing how the parties operated on a strict code of silence. Phones were confiscated at the door, NDAs were mandatory, and security teams were instructed to intervene only when things threatened to spill into public view. One former employee testified that their job wasn't just to manage logistics, but to ensure that Diddy's chosen guests were kept in line. These weren't just assistants or handlers, they were gatekeepers, tasked with maintaining the illusion of perfection, while the reality was anything but. And then there were the rumors of targeted humiliation, thinly veiled as jokes or pranks, that Diddy allegedly used to remind everyone who held the power in the room. It wasn't enough to be the host, he needed everyone to know that their place in his world was conditional.
I feel like we're almost becoming numb to the lawsuit after the lawsuit after the lawsuit. And do all of the allegations against Combs so far that we've seen make the claims here, these new claims, do you think it makes it more or less true? In other words,
but what made these parties even more unsettling were the rumors of a secret guest list. According to documents subpoenaed by prosecutors, Diddy allegedly maintained a private roster of priority attendees, individuals who were handpicked for reasons that went beyond casual networking. These weren't just celebrities or influencers, they were people seen as critical to his influence and carefully cultivated relationships that could be leveraged for personal or professional gain. The list reportedly included powerful business executives, media moguls, and even political figures, all of whom were said to have attended these events under the strictest of confidentiality agreements. Witnesses claimed that these individuals were often ushered into separate, hidden areas of Diddy's estates, locations that were off-limits to the main partygoers. The implication was clear, these weren't just parties, they were opportunities to secure loyalty, to forge alliances, and, allegedly, to gather compromising material that could be used later. And then there was the question of surveillance. Former security staff testified under anonymity about the extent of the monitoring systems installed at Diddy's properties. Every room, every hallway, every corner of these estates was reportedly under constant watch. Footage from these cameras, some of which had been obtained by federal investigators, painted a picture of a man obsessed with control. But it wasn't just about safety or keeping tabs on his properties. Prosecutors hinted that some of this footage could have been used to intimidate or manipulate attendees, creating an atmosphere where no one felt entirely safe. The recordings, they claimed, weren't just passive documentation, they were tools of power, cataloging moments that could be revisited and weaponized if necessary.
You understand? So don't never say nothing negative. If you don't like my page and don't like what I'm posting, go f yourself. Seriously.
And it wasn't just the staff who were now speaking out. A cascade of former collaborators began to emerge, each one offering another piece of the puzzle. Members of Danity Kane, Diddy's manufactured girl group from the mid-2000s, had long hinted at the toxic environment they endured while under his management. But now, their vague allusions were being replaced with explicit details. Aubrey O'Day described a system of control that extended far beyond the music studio. She spoke of grueling rehearsals with no end, of being berated for her physical appearance, and of a pervasive fear that any misstep would result in instant exile. Dawn Richard, another former member, went even further. She claimed to have witnessed Diddy's temper firsthand, describing moments where his anger turned to physical intimidation, not just with her but with others in his circle. And then there was the testimony about the tunnels. Yes, the infamous tunnels, long whispered about in online forums and conspiracy threads, were confirmed to exist. Beneath one of Diddy's sprawling mansions, architectural plans revealed a network of underground passageways, complete with hidden rooms and locked compartments. Prosecutors introduced evidence suggesting that these tunnels weren't just a quirky feature of a luxurious estate, they were a functional component of his operation. Surveillance footage retrieved from these areas painted a chilling picture, a space where cameras monitored every move, where access was tightly controlled, and where secrets were kept in physical and digital form. Files, recordings, even handwritten notes, all stored away in what prosecutors described as an archive of leverage.
I don't care, bro. I'm gonna post my wife as much as I want. Go post your wife on your fucking Instagram.
But perhaps the most unnerving aspect of the trial came when Diddy's own family was dragged into the fray. His sons, Christian and Justin, who had once been paraded on social media as the heirs to his empire, were now under scrutiny. Christian, in particular, faced allegations that mirrored the same patterns of entitlement and abuse described by Cassie and other witnesses. A former yacht crew member detailed an incident where Christian allegedly behaved inappropriately during one of the family's infamous chartered events. The crew member claimed that Diddy was not only aware of the behavior but actively dismissed it, brushing off concerns with a cavalier attitude that suggested he saw himself, and by extension, his family, as untouchable. The prosecution wasn't just interested in the actions of Diddy himself, they were building a case that suggested a systemic culture of control, one that extended to everyone in his orbit. And this wasn't just hearsay. Digital evidence began to surface, including text messages, emails, and even encrypted communications that painted a damning picture of coordination. Staff members discussed how to handle problematic guests, how to enforce silence, and even how to clean up after incidents that could have exploded into public scandals. One email chain, introduced during the trial, showed a conversation between Diddy's legal team and his personal assistants, discussing the fallout of an event that had gone awry. The tone was clinical, almost detached, as though they were managing a PR crisis rather than addressing real harm.
But that said, he has a long history of wildly inappropriate and bizarre behavior.
And then there were the high-profile mentions, names that sent ripples through the courtroom and the media alike. Ye, Britney Spears, Michael B. Jordan. These weren't just casual acquaintances or party guests. They were people who had, at one point or another, been part of Diddy's meticulously curated world. While none of these figures were accused of wrongdoing, their mere association became a talking point. What did they know? How much had they seen? And why had no one spoken out before? The defense attempted to use these mentions as a distraction, painting Diddy as a man whose life was intertwined with the brightest stars of Hollywood. But to the prosecution, these names were evidence of his influence, a reminder that his power extended far beyond his own actions. As the trial continued, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew heavier. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a cultural reckoning. The question wasn't just whether Diddy was guilty of the charges against him, it was how his behavior had been allowed to go unchecked for so long. How many people had looked the other way? How many careers had been built on complicity? And how many more secrets were still buried beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed?
Argue a lot of things about Kanye, but you cannot argue that he's an intelligent guy.
And that's where we'll leave it for now. The walls are closing in, but the big question remains, how deep does this go? What happens when a man who built an empire on control loses that control? And who else might fall in the process? Let us know your theories down below, and we'll catch you in the next one.